The missing anti-war celebrities, that is the topic of tonight's Byline. We've heard from politicians and pundits on all sides of the issue that is Syria. Those that think Western nations, led by the U.S., the coalition of one, should attack Syria over the use of chemical weapons, and those that think the U.S. should stay out. The Russians and Chinese have warned the Americans, stay out of the area. Russian President Vladimir Putin working just as hard diplomatically to block U.S. intervention as U.S. President Barack Obama is working to get support for an attack. Putin even proposed the idea of putting Syria's chemical weapons under international supervision to ensure the Assad regime could not use them. That's something Assad said he would agree to. Meanwhile, the Syrian leader went on U.S. TV to deny he ever used chemical weapons in the first place.
The Russians have completely opposite evidence that the missiles were thrown from area where the rebels control. That reminds me about what Kerry said, about the big lie that Colin Powell said in front of the world on satellites about the WMD in Iraq before going to war, when he said, this is our evidence. Actually, he gave false evidence. In this case, Kerry didn't even present any evidence.
On the other side of the argument, U.S. President Barack Obama is making the case with major U.S. networks that the Americans should intervene. Missing amid the booming sound of the drums of war, the anti-war chants of Hollywood celebrities. When former U.S. President George W. Bush was heading to war with Iraq in 2003, anti-war celebrities were everywhere. They maintained their calls for an end to the U.S. invasion of Iraq and often the Afghan war as well, right up until Bush left office and Obama took over. Well, he brought about the surge in both countries. Obama also started a war in Libya, sent troops to other world hotspots, but there's been no anti-war outcry from the Hollywood elite. Even now, with Syria about to be bombed, they mostly remain silent. Back in 2005, Janeane Garofalo, the actress and failed talk show host, was taken to the airwaves to say that war is failure. When you are at war, you have failed. Well, the liberal heroine was everywhere. She loved to speak out against the war and Bush. Now, apparently she's gone missing. She could have been abducted by aliens. We're not too sure. Sean Penn once said, I think we're past the point in human evolution where there's such a thing as winning wars. But that was 2007 when Bush was in power. Now, crickets on Syria with Obama pushing for another war. Maybe Penn is too busy visiting South American dictators. Neil Young, the Canadian singer turned American anti-war activist, still hosts a section of his website devoted to denouncing the war in Iraq. But on his website and elsewhere online and in the media, he's silent on Syria. Martin Sheen, Bruce Springsteen, Tim Robbins, where are they? They were all big critics of the war in Iraq before it began and after. Now, nothing. It's not like these celebrities aren't being asked. George Clooney was asked about Syria at a news conference promoting his new film, Gravity. The man who won an award for the anti-war, war for oil in the Middle East flick, Syriana, actually said this. He was asked a question about Syria. He said, I actually thought you would ask me about Ben Affleck playing Batman. But no, it's Syria. He didn't elaborate. That's a far cry from claiming during the Bush years that wars just create more enemies. What's changed, George? Could it be you don't want to upset Obama, the man you hosted a $40,000 a plate fundraising dinner for? Maybe. The Hollywood Reporter has one of their writers off querying a number of well-known anti-war celebs attending the Toronto International Film Festival. Now, it's always safe to be anti-war in the peaceable Kingdom of Canada, right? Well, the trade paper got nothing to report other than, well, one TIFF attendee contacted by the Hollywood Reporter was ready to comment until being cautioned against it by his film's distributor. Susan Sarandon, we all remember her. She used to be married to Tim Robbins and shares his anti-war activist tendencies. She isn't quite silent, but she did tell the Daily Beast that Syria's a tough one. Syria's tricky because the thing is, obviously, they are at war. Iraq was such a clear lie, and so many people knew. Now, other than asking for support for refugees on Twitter, that's as much as Sarandon has said in her interview. She quickly turned to bashing Halliburton and fracking for oil and gas. Sheryl Crow once called war bad karma and added this, I think war is never the answer to solving any problems. What's she saying about Syria now that her guy might bomb? Well, she's asking people on Twitter, anyone else nervous about what's going on in Syria? Like, for sure, eh? Okay. With that, though, is she getting upset at the possible bombing from the guy she campaigned for, or is she in support of it? She's not saying. Those that have come out against the war, including Madonna, Danny Glover, Barbra Streisand, they've done so in a much more muted fashion than they used to. Were these Hollywood celebrities against the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan because they were against war, or because they were against George W. Bush? The same could be said of me. Look, I supported taking out Saddam Hussein in Iraq and ousting the Taliban and bin Laden in Afghanistan, but more than a decade of Western nations attempting nation building with limited success has changed my point of view. It's done the same for a lot of people, but we can point to those experiences and say, we've learned, we've changed our minds. What's the excuse for the Hollywood celebs? Is it simply that their guy, Obama, is now the guy running the war and that makes it okay? This is about hypocrisy in its purest form, and it's something we should remember the next time Hollywood starts peddling its liberal left elitist agenda. And that's the byline.
Hollywood celebrities are lashing out. Alec Baldwin is head of the Film Actors Guild.
The Film Actors Guild believes that what the world needs is compassion, not violence.
And the corporations sit there in their corporation buildings, flowery meadows and rainbow skies and rivers made of chocolate.
The actors are calling for an emergency meeting. Already expected to attend are Helen Hunt, George Clooney, Liv Tyler, Martin Sheen, Susan Sarandon, Janine Garofalo, and Matt Damon.
Matt Damon.
Joining me now for further discussion on the missing celebrities, Ben Shapiro. He's a Sun News contributor, editor-at-large at Breitbart. And Ben, you did write a book called Primetime Propaganda. Is this what we're facing, more of the liberal elites just trying to push an agenda that, well, back then it wasn't against the war, it was against George W. Bush?
Absolutely. I mean, suddenly all the anti-war activists have gone into the closet, and meanwhile, there are folks out there who are actually trying to blame the Tea Party for incipient war in Syria. There's a rapper out here named Azealia Banks, and she said that the only reason that there's any controversy over this is these crazy Tea Partiers have made President Obama so toxic simply because he's black that now when Obama tries to do something in Syria, well, somehow that's Tea Partiers' fault. So Hollywood has remained largely silent on this because Hollywood understands that if it's Clinton, if it's Obama, that's different. If it's George W. Bush and he's actually going to do something useful with regard to getting rid of bad regimes, then that's the time to speak out. I think that Hollywood kind of knows deep down that President Obama isn't really going to do much of anything in Syria, and that makes them feel better.
John Kerry, and you wrote about this at Breitbart today, said it will be an unbelievably small action. What's the point of going to Congress? What's the point of all this debate if it's going to be unbelievably small?
Well, when I think deterrence, what I first think is unbelievably small. I think John Kerry's actually going to fly over to Syria and then give Bashar Assad a wet willy as punishment for using. Yeah, he's going to lick his finger and stick it in Bashar Assad's ear as an excuse, as retaliation for gassing 1,400 people. But the whole point of this whole charade was to cast all of the responsibility onto Congress, to say to Congress, look, it's your problem now. You're the ones who make the call. If you say no, then we'll abide by that. If you say yes, then President Obama wins. Well, now it looks like Obama is going to get away with even more than that. There are reports today that after John Kerry implied that Bashar al-Assad should turn over all of his chemical weapons, that Vladimir Putin jumped on that, went to Assad and said, hey, why don't you turn over some of your chemical weapons? Now, anybody who watches Middle Eastern politics knows what a charade this is. Assad isn't going to turn over any of his weapons. He's going to talk to the UN for a while. He's going to try and defuse the situation, and nothing will end up happening. But President Obama and John Kerry and Hillary Clinton, they're already making noises as though that's going to be good enough for them. So all of this big talk, all of this bluster is going to amount to nothing in the end.
With about 20 seconds left, will Obama save face if Assad does that?
I think that'll save face because the media in the United States is so biased, but it's pretty clear here that Assad, the mullahs in Iran, and Vladimir Putin have dramatically outplayed President Obama on all of this, and this will probably end with Assad still in power and without any real sort of consequences for gassing 1,400 folks.
All right, Ben, great talking to you as always. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot.
You can check out more from Ben Shapiro at Breitbart.com. He and his team will continue to follow the news there. We'll continue to follow it here. Email me your thoughts, byline@sunmedia.ca. Stick around.